Alright. Yeah, it's ready. Let's get ready to build this thing. Let's get this float going now. Yeah, let's get the salt.
Salt.
Let's get the water now.
Water.
Bring in some of that darkness. Yeah, get soundproofing now.
Soundproofing now.
Get some earplugs.
Get the earbuds. Just packets of petroleum jelly. What'd you say?
Q-tips.
Q-tips.
Now we just need the customers.
Get the customer.
All right, welcome everybody. Graham over here.
This is Ashkan, and we got a question for us.
Which is, where can I find parts for my filtration unit? I might also be interested in completely replacing my unit. Where can I find already built new ones?
Yeah, I mean, just come on down to Khan's Tank Parts.
Tank Part Emporium.
Yeah, it's a little spot here in Portland. We'll fly you out so you can peruse it.
We'll fly
It's not
people
a very good business model, admittedly.
Yeah, we've been losing a lot of money.
Huge amounts of money, but people have been buying small bits of PVC pipe from us.
So there's whole different manufacturers that manufacture different parts of your filtration system.
Yeah.
The most easy to replace just being PVC pipes that you can grab from pretty much any Home Depot or regular hardware store.
If you're getting the right ones, because there's different grades of PVC pipe. Well, yeah, I mean, so you're trying to fix something on your filtration system, or
Replace the whole
upgrade or replace the entire thing. Well, those are two very different things, I think. Like, I need to replace this one little piece versus I'm trying to build a whole new filtration system.
Right. Yeah. And it says like find parts for my filtration unit. So I'm guessing that's like if they want to upgrade their UV or if they want to add in a flow meter. Or
so not like, because if something's broken, I mean, the obvious answer is to contact the manufacturer and get another part. I mean, that's like the easiest way to make sure you're getting the right thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And then there's certain parts that are like pretty generic that you're going to be able to get. I mean, depending on the filtration system, you can certainly replace parts that are a little more customized with more generic versions of them, or some of the pieces on your system are probably just going to be very generic, like the PVC piping and corners and
ball
valves, things like that. So, I mean, that's stuff you can get from Home Depot all the way to usually pool company parts is often what you see for those kind of pieces of it. So for the things that the valves that close sections of your pipe so that you can unscrew sections and your entire float tank liquid doesn't just come pouring out. You might get something from Home Depot. It could do the job. It's probably not specifically what your float tank came with. They're maybe going one level higher and going to some specific pool manufacturing company like Hayward or Waterway or something like that and getting maybe a slightly nicer kind of union to put there. So knowing those kind of big names in the pool world is going to likely lead you to many of the parts.
And I mean, that's the easiest stuff. And to be honest, I mean, at this point, we do all of our own filtration system repair, or our managers at the shop do it. So, if we get a leak even just in a union or in a piece of PVC pipe, we're the ones who are hacksawing that thing apart, re-gluing it, re-putting this together. But you could also hire just a regular pool kind of, what would you call that? Like a pool plumber almost, or like a pool maintenance pool.
Yeah, I get really hesitant
worker
about having people like that come in. I have not seen it generally go well for people. Like when I've gone to float centers and they've gone that direction, they often end up with the wrong equipment. Because in my mind,
not the equipment. I'm just talking about once you have the pipes, you're replacing a ball valve, let's say, totally generic filtration system. You're not even like adding on any new components other than piping, which is leaking. You still think just do it yourself? Don't bring in a professional? I
mean, you could usually what happens is what I've seen is if someone brings in like a pool person, then that pool person comes in and has all these opinions like, well, you don't need this thing here. I can just do this. And
sure.
And then I see it. I'm like, oh boy. Like, yeah, I mean, they did pool logic And that makes sense for pools, but there's almost always something where I'm like, no, they really shouldn't have done that. Like that is something that makes sense for pools that doesn't make sense in this context for float tanks. And if that's not the case, then it's probably simple enough to just we're just talking about cutting and gluing PVC together.
But like, let's say someone felt uncomfortable with that process, with the actual cutting apart their filtration system and putting it back together. Again, like we've done it ourselves. We've trained our shop managers to do it. It's not the hardest thing. But if you do need to hire a professional.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like a really petty thing to hire a professional for. Like, because beyond literally just cutting a pipe and gluing it, I would feel nervous having a professional like that come in and start providing information or advice that I wouldn't know whether is good or not. And I feel like the cutting of PVC and gluing it is something that, is simple enough that someone should probably learn it. Like it's a small enough change and maybe something that has to happen often enough that I would recommend somebody in the shop.
And you can
learns how
definitely
to
do it
that.
yourself. Like it's not the hardest thing in the world. Again, like our shop managers can do it, so anyone can do it.
Yeah, I mean, those guys are a bunch of buffoons and they've figured it out.
It's really not. And you can actually have your just regular plumber come in and do this too. It's just you're paying a premium at that point for actually having them come in and work with the systems and stuff like that. Also, keep in mind, I guess we should have just started with this, but if you're doing your own adaptations to the filtration system, you're probably breaking warranty unless you've actually had it approved by a manufacturer to go in and change these things. So,
or possibly if you're under regulations, that's things that, sometimes you need to report that stuff or get approval before you just start changing parts of your filtration system.
Yeah, so there's like a little background work that needs to get done before you even launch into doing any of this stuff.
And let's go back. Let me I feel like I can categorize kind of the equipment a little bit that you see on a float tank. And in my mind, there's stuff in there that's just pulled straight from the pool and spa world is kind of one category of stuff. There's other stuff that is used in other industries, but not the pool and spa industry. So, on a lot of float tanks, there's kind of industrial equipment that is used widely for some other application or multiple applications, but not specifically pools and spas. And then there's like a small set of components that are, I think, specific to float tanks or, very, very rare items that are specifically well
uncommon
suited to
elsewhere at the very least.
Yeah, exactly. Like an inline heater, I would say, is an example of that, where they are making these inline heaters, and there's tons of inline heaters out there you can buy. But for a float tank, you're going to want like a really specific one that has, a certain type of metal, like a titanium heating element, and to hold up against that salt. And like you've narrowed the huge field of inline heaters down to an extremely small subset of ones that are actually going to work for you. So there's, and then there's other pieces that I think manufacturers just like, have slightly altered themselves or have adjusted in a way that makes them more suitable to float tanks, or, have maybe replaced certain metal parts on with things that won't rust or be destroyed in the float solution.
Yeah, some of the intense ones involve ozone and actually going in and finding check valves and things like that won't get clogged up with salt. And, there's some pretty, it goes everything from just adding in extra gaskets so that salt water is not leaking out of a filter to, like almost adjusting the internal mechanisms on some pretty advanced filtration equipment. So again, not that these things are items you couldn't do yourself, but just know, like, even if you're just going in to try and replace one of the parts of your filtration system that's not functioning properly, a direct replacement might still not be what the manufacturer had installed. So always reaching out to the manufacturer first is the best thing to do, even if you're going to be making the repairs, just to find out that you're on the same page and you're doing the right kind of repair, I
feel like, here's an example. I don't know if they still do this, but Superior would, with their Dell Ozone kind of solar eclipse units that do ozone and UV, they would put a little check valve into that ozone tube, because that's like a very float tank problem, is that this tube that's supposed to be putting ozone gas into your system will get a little bit of salt water up there, and then the water will evaporate and the salt will crystallize and you'll get salt clogging this tube up, which is not a thing that like pools or, any other application that this device is used in is going to encounter. But for float tanks, they went in there and installed this little check valve, and you, like, unless you open this thing up, you're not going to really know. It's pretty much invisible to you when you just get that equipment from them. And pumps, pumps have impellers in them, and often those impellers that are the things that are spinning to actually move the liquid have a certain diameter that's supposed to match the density of liquid that it's moving. So if you're getting something for float tanks, I wouldn't be surprised if the float tank manufacturer specifically asked the pump company to trim those impellers to a specific diameter.
Almost all of them do. I actually don't know of a single manufacturer that doesn't have those pre-trimmed going into the float tank.
For the magnetic ones especially.
Yeah.
So, there's stuff like that is, and again, that's just a piece of equipment that's like inside of your pump, and you would never know by looking at it that some custom work like that has been done.
Yeah. So it's just one of the things where you want to make sure you're informed going into it. I guess as to the question, like, where would you find these parts? It's from all over, like all different manufacturers. That said, the second part, and by that I mean the UV manufacturer is almost certainly going to be different than your pump manufacturer, which is going to be different than your filter manufacturer. It's not like there are companies that offer mini arrays of types of products for the pool world and for filtration, but for our float tank applications, it's really unlikely you're going to be getting even more than a couple elements of your filtration system from the same manufacturer. And likely every major element is actually going to be from a totally different manufacturer. So there's not like a singular place where you're just going to go and the Khan's Emporium of spare float tank parts does not actually exist yet.
Yeah, yet. And then it will, and it'll be great.
We'll fly people out.
That'll just be the answer. And each piece of PVC will cost $1,000. But
no, so I was leading up to the complete replacement, though.
Well, hold on. Before that, though, the other thing to
back up a little. I was getting way ahead of. I put the horse before the cart again. Sorry, inside joke there. Carts come before horses.
The other variable is that often where your float tank is manufactured can influence a lot of what pieces of the equipment are. So even simple pieces, if you got a float tank that was manufactured in Europe or England specifically, they may be buying local parts that the threading may not match exactly, or there's little things like that where even the simple pieces can be a little deceptive depending on geographically where you got the float tank from.
Even here, there seems to be two different types of union threads. Like when you're joining things together, it's just a gamble. If you're just replacing one side of your plumbing union, like the part where you can kind of unscrew it, and you go to just buy the other half, there's a good chance the threading won't actually match. There's like double standards even just within the U.S., which is interesting.
I have a few more warnings still too. All right, next on the list, some of these components require electricity and communication with the brains of your float tank. So, some things like a piece of piping or a filter may be easier to replace than others.
Unless you get smart pipe.
Where it's just detecting all the salt crystals going through it.
Monitor it with your iPhone. Anyway, sorry, go on.
So some of these other components that connect, that have electronics and need to be run and need to be, turned on and in coordination with your pump turning on, those are things that get wired into the control system of your float tank, and that control system is almost always custom built and may not have enough power to supply a new component you're looking at getting, or, that adds a layer of complexity. And my other warning is just that this stuff is complicated in general.
Yep.
I would be careful to just start deciding that you can replace certain components, because these things are a system. They work together. Like if you want to drop your turnovers and or do faster turnovers, you can't just get a bigger pump, because everything is sized to the pump. And so, this will have to get bigger and that'll have to get bigger. And, you kind of have to be aware of how all this stuff works together. And so just be careful, be careful out there. And if you come on down to Khan's Tank Pieces Plaza, like we'll get you guided and make sure you have the right stuff.
Cool. And I had more too.
More warnings?
Yeah, no, not more warnings, just more questions. The second part of the question was, what if they wanted to replace the entire thing? Yeah. So for that, just to cut you off because you've been talking for a while this episode, I thought I might just get a few words in edgewise, So honestly, tank manufacturers, like it's not the most uncommon thing for float tank manufacturers to sell their entire filtration system as an add-on that you could put onto a float tank. And, it'll vary what you need, or actually just the length of time you'll need to run your filtration cycles will differ depending on the full volume of your tub. If you're buying a filtration system that's normally attached to a 200-gallon tank and you're putting it on a 400-gallon tank, obviously the kind of cycles, the length of time it takes to do one full volumetric turnover of your solution is going to be longer because the unit wasn't made for that. But yeah, if the volume's there, I know at least 2 to 3 manufacturers who will sell their entire filtration pack, and I wouldn't be surprised if almost the majority out there will sell huge parts or the entire thing out to another tub.
Yeah, and I feel like it's getting harder to do stuff like this. Like as float tanks get more sophisticated, their control systems are controlling the temperatures and, turning the heaters on and off and adjusting all sorts of different stuff and turning the lights in the system on and off. And it gets more and more complicated as float tanks get kind of technologically more advanced to decide to just swap one thing out with another.
Yeah, and it's not the easiest thing. So I guess, is there any other place where they can get like a full-fledged system other than from a float tank manufacturer?
Yeah, I mean, a float tank manufacturer or like really learning enough about all this to do it yourself.
Yeah, that's still piecemeal, like everything is just so specific. Yeah, everything's so specific to float tanks. There's just no other place to get it other than.
And again, I would not trust a pool person to build me a float tank filtration system.
No, okay. So here's the scenario I was curious about. It's going to be a long episode, but this is like hairy stuff. Like, let's say they built their own filtration system, or a pool person talked them into it, or whatever, right? And now like one bit of their plumbing piece is leaking, and they realize they want to like upgrade to a more serious UV unit. Right? What's the best thing to do in this case? Like they have kind of a custom setup already, or they just decided that their UV unit is underpowered. Like, how do they go about just upgrading the UV to a new unit that they think is going to be right?
Yeah, I mean, really the complicated part in there to me is the electrical part of it. So, I mean, I would recommend having like an electrician or at least a low volt electrician or someone do that part of it, connected to the brain and make sure all that stuff is working. And the rest is, I mean, mostly just cutting PVC pipe and gluing PVC pipe.
And I guess like Ashkan said earlier, sizing it properly as well, making sure that the UV that you're getting now is matching the gallons per minute of your pump, and that, you feel that it's actually sized for the amount of water you're going to be cranking through there,
Yeah. And that, again, like I have not seen pool people make good decisions in those situations.
Yeah.
When I've been out to float centers and they're like, yeah, I hired this pool guy. And like, I'm like looking at their thing. I'm like, that's not like big enough at all. Like they just don't, they're really under the assumptions of what they're used to. And I feel like that leads to some weird stuff in general. That's just been my general experience. Like if I were to hire a pool guy for almost anything other than just literally cutting and gluing pipe, then I would want to like have enough knowledge and feel confident enough in my knowledge to tell them like exactly what I want and not listen to their opinion. And at that point, when you're just hiring someone for cutting pipe, I feel like it's not worth it.
There you have it. Don't trust any pool people. And if you have your own questions, head on over to floatanksolutions.com/podcast, and we will explore them live right here on the air.
Yeah.
Well, live for us. We've made this joke before, but it's not. It's recorded for you.
I feel like they understand that.
You're smart people. Yeah.
All right. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Bye, everyone.